Have you ever felt like you're working hard but getting nowhere? Like the system is stacked? You're just a piece in someone else's game? Karl Marx believed you're not imagining it. He believed you were living in a war, a quiet, relentless war between classes. In history, it's not a tale told by kings, it's a battlefield carved by conflict. Layer by layer, generation after generation. Every paycheck, every rent increase, every moment you question if this is all there is. Marx would say, it's not personal, structural, it's history, repeating through you. To him, these aren't isolated events. They are symptoms of an old disease. The disease of inequality rooted not in evil intent, but in how the world is built. Marx argued that human history isn't shaped by divine providence, individual genius, or mere accidents of fate, but by the grinding gears of economic relationships, specifically by the ever-present tension between those who control the means of production and those who sell their labor to survive. He didn't just write about history, he rewrote what history is. To understand the future, he said, we must understand the war beneath the surface. Karl Marx was born in 1818 in Trier, in what is now Germany, a city wrapped in the traditions of old Europe. His father was a lawyer, his upbringing middle class. Yet even as a youth, Marx saw cracks in the polished surface of society. He studied law, but it was philosophy that set his mind ablaze. At university, he absorbed Hegel's dialectics. The idea that history unfolds through contradictions and their resolution, yet even then, he felt Hegel had missed something fundamental. That ideas don't just shape reality, reality shapes ideas. It wasn't in pure thought, but in lived experience, especially economic life, that Marx believed the truth could be found. He turned to journalism, not as a career, but as a weapon. Through his writings, Marx dissected society with surgical precision. He covered factory conditions, child labor, poverty, not to describe suffering, but to diagnose it. And what he saw wasn't chaos, it was pattern. Behind the soot-covered faces and broken backs of workers, he saw a deeper law at work. Class struggle, the engine of history. So what drives history? Not chance, not genius, not even moral progress, but economic conflict. Marx called this the materialist conception of history. Beneath every noble ideal, freedom, justice, faith, lies a structure of economic power. He called this the base. The system of production, the way resources are created and distributed, everything else, art, law, religion, even philosophy, he called the superstructure. These are shaped by the base and serve, consciously or not, to reinforce it. In ancient Rome, it was patricians and plebs. In feudalism, lords and serfs. In Marx's time and arguably still today, it's the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisie owned the factories, the capital, the machinery. The proletariat owned nothing but their capacity to work. And because of this imbalance, conflict is inevitable. This isn't merely a political grievance, it's a structural inevitability. Under capitalism, labor becomes a commodity. The worker sells time and energy for wages, but the value they create far exceeds what they're paid. This surplus is extracted as profit. And in this extraction, Marx saw exploitation not as an exception, but as the rule. But can a system built to exploit ever be reformed? Is freedom possible when survival is tied to someone else's profit? These were not just questions for Marx, they were moral imperatives. Marx didn't believe in slow reform, he believed in rupture. In a dialectical movement, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Society creates contradictions it cannot resolve. And from those tensions, a new system must emerge. His most famous work, the Communist Manifesto, begins with thunder. A spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism. It was a ghost, yes, but also a prophecy. A call for the working class to awaken, to see themselves not as victims, but as agents of history. Workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. This wasn't just poetry, it was a roadmap. For Marx, the proletariat was uniquely positioned to end class struggle, not because of moral superiority, but because of their role in the system. They have no interest in perpetuating private ownership of production, because they benefit only from its dismantling. A proletarian revolution, in Marx's view, wouldn't just swap rulers. It would erase the very conditions that made rulers necessary. It would end history as a series of class struggles and begin something entirely new. But power, as history shows, never yields easily. Marx was exiled, vilified, and impoverished. He died in London in 1883, largely ignored by the world he tried to change. But his ideas refused to die. They marched through the Russian Revolution. They echoed in labor strikes, in university halls, in liberation movements across continents. They were twisted, praised, banned, weaponized, but never forgotten. Critics argue Marx underestimated capitalism's resilience. They point to worker protections, labor laws, rising standards of living. Has capitalism adapted, absorbing its critics? Perhaps. But look closer. Wage stagnation and a growing economy. Gig work disguised as freedom. Mental health collapsing under the weight of productivity. People are more connected and more alienated than ever. And here, Marx's second major contribution returns. Alienation. Not just of the worker from their labor, but from their essence. Under capitalism, Marx argued, the worker becomes a tool, not a creator, but a cog. Not a mind, but muscle. You are separated from the product of your work, from the process, and ultimately from yourself. What does it mean to be human in a system that measures you by output? What does freedom mean when your needs are monetized? So were you imagining it? That endless striving, that invisible weight pressing down? No, Marx would say. You were feeling history, not the history in textbooks, but the living history of struggle, of labor bent to capital, dignity reduced to wages, but also of resistance, of awakening. Marx gave us more than critique. He gave us a lens, a way to see through illusions, to recognize that the system we live in was built, and therefore it can be changed. Perhaps his dream of a classless society remains distant. Perhaps it was never fully possible, but his warning remains vital. If you do not understand the forces that shape your life, you will forever mistake your chains for freedom. So next time you clock in, or count down the days to payday, ask yourself, what story are you living in? And more importantly, who is writing it? Because maybe, just maybe, the pen is passed to you. Watch the full Philowhisp video and hear the whisper that once set the world on fire.